The sound of my skull hitting the marble table edge sounded like a dry twig snapping, crisp and terrifying. The world before my eyes spun violently. The sickly sweet smell of vanilla buttercream filled my nose, but it was immediately overpowered by the metallic tang of warm blood trickling down my neck and soaking my hair. Sarah didn't just shove the birthday cake into my face. She used both hands, channeling the full strength of pure hatred, to slam my head backward. Through the hazy fog of dizziness, I saw Sarah's face right up close. In a fleeting split second, right before she put on her fake mask of panic, I saw the naked truth. She was smiling. A sick, satisfied smile. "It's just a joke, Elena. Don't ruin the party with your drama." My mother's voice rang out, icy cold. She casually adjusted her expensive pearl necklace, completely ignoring the streak of fresh blood staining my silk dress. For 36 years, I accepted being the invisible shadow so this perfect family could shine. But tonight's impact didn't just crack my skull. It woke up a sleeping monster. My name is Elena Vance, and this is the night my own sister tried to murder me under the guise of a birthday prank. The headache wasn't just a throbbing sensation anymore. It had turned into a living creature, clawing violently behind my eye sockets. The stark white fluorescent lights of the ER felt like needles stabbing straight into my retinas. I lay alone on the crinkling paper of the hospital bed, listening to the rhythmic, soulless beep of the heart monitor, trying to convince myself that I was overreacting. That was the lesson I had memorized for 36 years. Elena Vance's pain was always secondary, a nuisance, just dramatizing the issue. In my head, Mom's voice still echoed, sharp as a razor. "Don't embarrass the family in public, Elena. Get up." I was even worrying about the high insurance deductible more than the crack in my skull. That is the tragedy of a child who has been gaslit for too long. Even when bleeding, I was afraid of being the troublemaker. The exam room door swung open, cutting off my chaotic thoughts. Dr. Matthews walked in. He was a man in his 60s, with neatly cut silver hair, exuding the cold authority of the medical elite. No social smile, none of the empty, reassuring words usually heard. In his hand was a tablet, and the way he looked at me wasn't like a doctor looking at a patient, but like an archaeologist who had just discovered a ruin that needed decoding. "Ms. Vance." His voice was deep and resonant, betraying no emotion. "We have your CT scan and X-ray results." I swallowed hard, the taste of dried blood still in my throat. "Is it bad, doctor?" "My sister. She said it was just a joke. Maybe just a scratch." Dr. Matthews didn't answer immediately. He turned the tablet screen toward me, pointing to a thin but distinct crack running along the occipital bone at the back of my head. "You have a skull fracture, Ms. Vance. An injury caused by extreme force, not an accidental fall or a light bump. If that impact had been a few centimeters off, you could have had a brain hemorrhage or permanent spinal damage." He paused, his sharp eyes drilling into me. "But that is not the only thing that concerns me." He swiped his finger on the screen, switching to another X-ray image, this time of my chest area. "This is a chest X-ray for a general check. Look here." His finger circled a spot on the 7th rib on the left side. "Do you see this calcification? This is a sign of an old rib fracture that healed on its own without medical intervention or proper setting. Based on the thickness of the calcium deposit, I estimate this injury occurred about 3 years ago." Time seemed to freeze. The cold room suddenly felt suffocating. 3 years ago. Memories rushed back like a slow-motion horror movie. The oak staircase in Grandma's old house. It was 10 days after her funeral. I was walking downstairs, carrying a stack of old books. Sarah was right behind me. I remembered the feeling of missing a step, an invisible but decisive shove on my back, and then the world tumbling. I remembered the pain tearing through my chest when I hit the banister. When I lay on the floor gasping in agony, Sarah had stood there looking down with a chillingly casual expression. "You're so clumsy, Elena," she said. "It's just a bruise. Don't whine about going to the doctor, it's a waste of money. Let me get some ice." I had believed her. I had gritted my teeth through the pain every time I breathed for 2 months, telling myself I was just a clumsy, weak little sister. My voice trembled, breaking. I didn't know it was broken. My sister said. She said it was just a bruise. Dr. Matthews took off his glasses, a slow, calculated movement. He pulled a stool closer to the bed and sat down facing me. The professional coldness in his eyes softened a bit, replaced by a stern firmness. "Ms. Vance, listen to me clearly. I have been practicing medicine for over 30 years. I know how to distinguish between random accidents and intentional injuries. The skull fracture tonight, combined with this untreated old rib fracture, plus your hesitant attitude, it all creates a very specific medical profile." He placed his hands on his knees, leaning forward. "In this state, medical professionals like me are mandated reporters. When we see medical evidence consistent with long-term domestic abuse, we are required to report it to the authorities. This is not my choice, nor is it yours. It is the law." The word abuse dropped between us like a boulder. I wanted to object, to say it wasn't like that. Sarah was just difficult. But the image of the broken rib on that blue-lit screen was undeniable proof. My body had recorded the truth that my mind had deliberately denied. "I have called the police," Dr. Matthews said, his voice steady. "Detective Morrison is waiting, outside. She specializes in domestic violence and serious crimes. I advise you, for the safety of your own life, tell the truth. Next time, you might not have the chance to sit here and listen to me." He stood up and walked out. Before the door could close, a woman walked in. Detective Morrison didn't look like cops in TV dramas. She was around 50, wearing a crisp ash-gray suit with neat short hair and sharp dark brown eyes that seemed capable of seeing through every lie. She didn't carry a gun openly, but the aura she radiated made the air in the room heavy. Morrison pulled the chair into the spot the doctor had just left, taking out a small notebook and a fountain pen. She didn't ask, "Are you okay?" or "What happened?" She looked straight into my eyes, her gaze steady and piercing. "Ms. Vance." Her voice was calm but held a hidden power. "Dr. Matthews told me you have old, untreated injuries that match the timeline of past accidents. Tonight, at the birthday party, there were 12 witnesses who saw your sister use significant force on your head. I'm not here to hear about a freak accident. I am here to build a case file." She flipped to a new page, the pen tip touching the paper, waiting. "Let's start with that staircase 3 years ago. Who was standing behind you?" Her question was like a key inserted into a rusted lock in my mind. For the first time in 36 years, I realized silence did not protect me. Silence was slowly killing me. I looked at the shiny police badge on her belt, took a deep breath, the breath that the broken rib years ago had once prevented, and began to speak. The hospital room door didn't open in the usual way. It was shoved open violently, hitting the rubber stopper with a jarring thud. The air, thick with antiseptic and dried blood, was immediately invaded by a familiar, nauseating scent. Chanel No. 5. My mother's scent. She walked in first, her ivory silk evening gown still wrinkle-free, as if she had just stepped out of a tea party rather than arriving at the scene of an aggravated assault. Following her was Dan, my stepfather, shoulders slumped in his expensive suit, eyes glued to the cold, tiled floor, perfectly playing the role of the silent servant, and finally, Sarah. "Oh my God, Elena!" Sarah rushed toward the bed, her high heels clicking frantically on the floor. Her face was a masterpiece of acting, mascara smeared calculably to form perfect black streaks on her cheeks, eyes wide and watery, lips trembling. "Are you okay? I was worried to death. I didn't mean to, you know that, right? We were just joking." She reached out to grab my hand. Driven by a survival instinct rising from my subconscious, I recoiled, pressing myself against the bed rail. The heart monitor beside me beeped rapidly, betraying the primal fear spreading in my chest. Detective Morrison stood up, stopping Sarah with a decisive hand gesture. "Back up. Immediately." The atmosphere in the room froze. My mother, Madeline Vance, stepped forward, blocking the detective from her golden child. Her eyes swept over the police badge, then stopped at Morrison's face with disdain cleverly disguised under a polite veneer. "Ma'am, I don't know what my daughter, Elena, has told you." My mother's voice rang out, smooth but sharp as a scalpel. "But this is a private family matter. Elena has always had a tendency to dramatize things since she was a child. She has always been jealous of her sister and is willing to do anything for attention, even hurting herself." She turned to me, her gaze shifting from social to threateningly subtle. "Elena, tell the detective you slipped. Don't make a mess of things. Do you know how panicked Sarah is? You are ruining your sister's reputation." "Mrs. Vance," Detective Morrison cut in, her voice deep and steely, unshaken by my mother's authority. "Your daughter didn't slip. She was attacked. And Dr. Matthews here." She pointed to the old doctor standing with arms crossed in the corner. "Has just confirmed a long list of untreated old injuries. Broken ribs, multiple soft tissue injuries. How do you intend to explain that?" My mother's face didn't change color. She gave a slight shrug, a gesture terrifyingly elegant. "She is very clumsy, always falling downstairs, running into doors. We tried to protect her, but..." Lies. A single word, light as a feather but cutting through the chaotic noise like a silenced gunshot. All eyes turned to the dark corner of the room, to the armchair meant for visitors. I had been so focused on Mom and Sarah's play that I hadn't realized someone was sitting there. Aunt Patricia stood up. For the past 30 years, Aunt Patricia, my mother's younger sister, had always existed like an old piece of furniture at family gatherings. She always sat in the corner, holding a glass of water, eyes downcast, apologizing for breathing the same air as us. She was the shadow of a shadow. But today, the woman standing before us was not the timid aunt I knew. Her face was pale, hands clasped tight to stop the trembling, but her eyes burned with the fire of rage suppressed for too long. "Patricia," my mother hissed, her voice full of warning. "What are you doing here? Sit down and shut your mouth immediately." Aunt Patricia didn't look at my mother. She walked straight up to Detective Morrison. "I am a witness." Her voice trembled, but was clear. "I was at the restaurant tonight. I saw Sarah put something in Elena's wine glass before she drank it. And I saw the way Sarah slammed Elena's head onto the table. That wasn't a joke. That was an execution." The room fell into a deadly silence. Sarah's jaw dropped, her victim mask shattering, revealing naked panic. My mother froze. For the first time in my life, I saw her lose control. "You're crazy," Sarah hissed, lunging toward her aunt. "You crazy, mooching old lady. Who would believe you?" "I believe her," Detective Morrison said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from her belt, the metal glinting under the fluorescent light. "And the court will believe her too when they see the security camera footage we just seized." Aunt Patricia turned to me. For the first time in decades, she looked straight into my eyes, no longer avoiding or afraid. She stepped closer to the bed, bending down to whisper, her voice urgent, ignoring my mother's screaming protests and Sarah's fake sobbing in the background. "Elena, listen to me." She grabbed my cold hand. "I have been a coward for 30 years. I saw everything but didn't dare speak because I was afraid Madeline would kick me out. But tonight, Seeing you on the floor with blood all over your hair, I knew I couldn't be silent anymore. She squeezed my hand tight. Grandma Eleanor left you a way out. Do you remember the ebony box she gave you before she died? The box you keep on top of your wardrobe? I nodded weakly, the headache throbbing again. Yes. I never opened it. I thought it was just old jewelry. Not jewelry, Aunt Patricia whispered, eyes darting to my mother who was being pushed back by the police. Tonight, as soon as you are discharged, you must open that box. Eleanor knew. She saw Sarah's true nature since she was a toddler. She prepared evidence. You need to see what's in there before the police take your mother's official statement. What's in it, Auntie? I asked, throat dry. Aunt Patricia stood up straight, looking past me, toward some dark past I had never known. The truth, Elena. The truth about the ownership of the house and, more importantly— She hesitated, voice lowering to a whisper. The truth about why your real father left 31 years ago. Not because he hated you. He left because he was terrified of the monster living in his house. Aunt Patricia drove her old sedan, taking me home in heavy silence. The suburban night rain began to fall, droplets lashing against the windshield as if trying to wash away the grime of secrets buried for too long. The doctor had prescribed me a heavy dose of painkillers and ordered absolute rest, but my mind was more awake than ever. The physical pain was just background noise. What was screaming in my head was Aunt Patricia's whisper, "Grandma left you a way out." We entered the house. The Victorian home where 3 generations of the Vance family had lived was submerged in darkness. Mom and Sarah were still at the police station dealing with the mess they created, leaving the space empty and cold. I led Aunt Patricia to my bedroom, the smallest room, located at the end of the hall, where I had spent my childhood practicing being invisible. On top of the wardrobe, covered in a thick layer of gray dust, was the ebony box. I stood on my toes to get it down. The ebony wood was cold under my fingers. The brass lock was tarnished with time. I placed it on my desk, taking a deep breath of old wood mixed with dried lavender, Grandma Eleanor's signature scent. Open it, Elena, Aunt Patricia said, her voice hoarse. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped, the posture of someone awaiting a final verdict. I flipped the latch. The lid sprang open with a dry click. Inside, there was no jewelry, no gold or silver, just 3 items lying silently on the red velvet lining, but their weight could crush my entire life. The first item was a thick legal document, the edges of the paper slightly yellowed. Right on the first page, bold letters hit my eyes, stopping my breath. Transfer on death deed. I turned the pages with trembling hands. The red notary's seal. Grandma Eleanor Vance's shaky but decisive signature. Date signed, 5 years ago. This, I whispered, unable to believe what I was reading. Does this mean— It means this house has belonged to you from the moment Grandma took her last breath, Aunt Patricia confirmed, her voice echoing in the quiet room. No need to go through probate court. No need for your mother's consent. Under state law, you have been the legal owner of this mansion for 3 years, Elena. You lived like a squatter, enduring the humiliation of Mom and Sarah in your own home. I was stunned. 3 years. I paid rent to my mother every month. I asked Sarah for permission to use the kitchen. I walked on eggshells for fear of being kicked out. In reality, they were the ones trespassing. Why didn't she tell me? I asked, a feeling of betrayal rising in my throat. Look at the second item. Aunt Patricia pointed to the box. It was an old photo, colors faded in 90s style. In the photo were me and Sarah. I was about 6 months old, in a crib, sleeping soundly. Sarah, then over 2 years old, was standing holding the crib rail looking down at me. At first glance, it was just a normal sisterly photo. But when I brought the photo closer under the desk lamp, The blood in my veins seemed to freeze. Sarah's eyes. A 2-year-old child shouldn't have those eyes. It wasn't curiosity, nor childish jealousy. It was a cold, cruel focus. Her tiny hands were reaching into the crib, not to caress, but the fingers were curled like claws, aimed straight at my throat. The photographer, probably Grandma, had clicked the shutter at the exact moment of a naked predatory instinct. On the back of the photo, Grandma's slanted handwriting noted a single line, June 14th, 1992. Michael stopped her in time. But I saw it. She never changes. Michael. I whispered the strange but familiar name. My dad. The man who left when I was 5. Grandma saw what your mother refused to see, Aunt Patricia said, tears beginning to roll down her cheeks. Sarah isn't normal, Elena. She was born lacking empathy. Psychiatrists call it antisocial personality disorder, but Grandma simply called it evil. I put the photo down, nausea rising. I reached for the last item, an envelope sealed with red wax, addressed, "To Elena, when you need the truth." I tore the envelope. The letter inside was handwritten, the shaky strokes of her final days. My dearest Elena, if you are reading this, I am probably gone, and you are wondering why your life is so miserable. I apologize for not being brave enough to protect you when I was alive. Your mother, Madeline, she was blinded by love for Sarah, or perhaps fear of her own firstborn daughter. 3 years ago, when I was very sick, Sarah rummaged through my papers. She found a copy of the house deed. She knew the house would belong to you. She went crazy, smashing things and threatening me. But I told her that if I died suspiciously, the police would receive the evidence I sent to my lawyer. Elena, be careful. Sarah knows the house is yours. The only way for her to get the house back is if you die without a will, or you are declared incapacitated. Then, guardianship and assets would fall to the next of kin, your mother and her. Your accidents. I fear they are not accidental. Open your eyes, my little granddaughter. Don't let blood ties blindfold you from the blade at your throat. The letter fell from my hand. Every scattered piece of the last 3 years suddenly fitted together into a complete and terrifying picture. The fall down the stairs happened exactly 10 days after Grandma's funeral, when the transfer deed took effect. The food poisoning that hospitalized me for 2 weeks last year. And tonight, the blow to the head. Sarah didn't just hate me, she was hunting me. Her goal wasn't to tease. The goal was to make me a cripple, a mental case or a corpse, so she could reclaim her house. The headache vanished, replaced by a coldness spreading from my spine to my entire body. I was no longer the pitiful little sister. I was the target of a murder-for-profit scheme, covered up under the name of family accidents. I looked up at Aunt Patricia. Did you know Sarah found the house papers 3 years ago? Auntie nodded, head bowed in regret. I overheard that argument. Sarah screamed, "That brat doesn't deserve it. She will never enjoy this house." I stood up, walked to the window, looking down at the empty street below. The image of the sister who always smiled sweetly in public was now revealed as a patient predator. But that predator made a fatal mistake. She thought I was still the stupid lamb of yesterday. I turned back, holding the transfer deed in my hand. My eyes reflected in the wall mirror held no trace of weakness. "Aunt Patricia," I said, my voice so calm I surprised myself. "Tomorrow take me to Grandma's lawyer. And after that, we're going to the police station." "What are you going to do?" Auntie asked, worried. I looked at the photo of the 2-year-old monster wanting to strangle her sister. "I will do what this family should have done 30 years ago," I replied. "I will stop playing the victim and start hunting." At 9 o'clock the next morning, I sat in the mahogany-paneled office of Mr. Henderson, the lawyer representing Grandma's estate. The air smelled of old. "I am paper and quiet power." When Mr. Henderson placed the transfer on death deed on the glass table, the sound was like a judge's gavel. "It is completely legal and inviolable, Ms. Vance," he said, pushing up his glasses. "Ms. Eleanor filed this document with the county 5 years ago. Legally, you have been the sole owner of that property from the moment she passed. The fact that your mother or sister didn't know, or pretended not to know, does not change this fact." I nodded, feeling relief mixed with disgust. The truth was protected by law. Now it was time to use it as a weapon. I called Detective Morrison as soon as I walked out of the lawyer's office. "I have motive," I said briefly, "and I have proof of intent to commit fraud." 30 minutes later, I sat in Interrogation Room 2 at the County Police Department. The space here was different from the hospital, cold, sterile, and reeking of stale cigarette smoke. Detective Morrison wasn't surprised to see the papers I presented. She arranged them neatly next to the growing case file. "We are one step ahead of you, Elena," Morrison said calmly. She turned her computer screen toward me. "We served a subpoena for the restaurant's security camera footage the night of the incident. You need to see this." The black and white video appeared. I saw myself laughing and talking naively, completely unaware of the blade hanging over my head. But the camera didn't just film me, it filmed the whole scene. In the corner of the screen, Sarah was standing at the bar. She wasn't looking at the drink menu. She was looking at the reflection in the mirror, watching our table. When the bartender turned his back, Sarah's hand moved quickly over my wine glass. A practiced, swift movement taking less than 2 seconds. No shaking. No hesitation. "Strong sedatives," Morrison explained, voice cold. "Your blood test results this morning confirmed positive for benzodiazepines. That's why you felt dizzy and couldn't fight back when attacked." But the most horrifying part was what followed, when the birthday cake was brought out. In slow motion, I saw Sarah wasn't joking. She gripped the plate with both hands, flexing her biceps, adjusting the angle to ensure the hard edge of the plate would collide directly with my skull. It was a calculated trajectory, not an out-of-control prank. And when I fell, lying motionless on the floor, Sarah leaned down. In the video, she put her face close to my ear. Everyone thought she was worried, but the high-resolution camera caught that moment. A thin smile flashing for a split second before she looked up and started wailing. "That is aggravated assault plus poisoning," Morrison said. But that's not all. This morning, a judge signed an emergency search warrant for Sarah Vance's electronic devices. The digital forensics team just sent the report back. She pushed another file toward me. "Your sister didn't just want to hurt you. She was building a project." I took the report, my fingers numb. The data recovery report from Sarah's cloud showed a search history spanning 3 years, coinciding with when Grandma died. How to void a transfer on death deed. Proving a relative has schizophrenia. Process for establishing conservatorship for adults in this state. Vestibular disorder drugs difficult to detect. Sarah's goal appeared clearly through each line of search history. She didn't plan to kill me immediately. That would cause suspicion and lose inheritance rights if police investigated. Her plan was much more sophisticated. She wanted to injure me, make me look unstable, clumsy, and gradually lose capacity. The ultimate goal was conservatorship. Sarah wanted to become my legal guardian. She wanted to control my finances, medical decisions, and most importantly, the right to manage my assets, including Grandma's house. She wanted to turn me into a prisoner in my own body, legalizing theft with a court stamp. The most terrifying part is this. Morrison pointed to the last page. It was a note recovered from the Notes app on Sarah's iPhone. The note title was just one letter, E. Inside was a cold timeline. May 2022. Stairs. Result, failure, only broken ribs. Need more force. August 2023. Food poisoning. Result, hospitalized 2 days. Mom believed she is weak. November 2024. Birthday. Head injury. Goal. Concussion. Permanent balance loss. Start filing for guardianship next month. I dropped the file, feeling nauseous. The nausea didn't come from the drugs, but from the systematic cruelty of someone sharing my blood. For 3 years, I had lived with a patient predator, one who recorded my pain like data lines in a business report. Do we have enough evidence to arrest her right now? I asked, my voice sounding unfamiliar, sharp and full of hatred. Detective Morrison shook her head slightly, her eyes glinting with the sharpness of a veteran hunter. Technically, yes. But do you want partial justice? Or do you want a full arrest? If we arrest her now, her lawyer will claim she is depressed, under pressure, and plead for probation. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. To ensure Sarah Vance goes to prison and can never get near you again, we need the final nail in the coffin. We need the testimony of the accomplice, or at least, the one who has enabled her for years. My mother, I said. Exactly. Morrison nodded. The district attorney has summoned Mrs. Madeline Vance here this afternoon, not as a suspect, but as a witness. She thinks she's coming to bail Sarah out. But we will show her this entire architecture of malice, and we will see if blind maternal love can defeat the naked truth. I looked into the one-way mirror on the interrogation room wall, seeing my reflection. The weak, apologetic girl of yesterday died in the ER. The person sitting here was the rightful owner of the Vance house and the holder of the key to destroy this family's lies. Bring her in, I said. I want to sit right here when she sees what her precious daughter has done. 2 p.m. Conference Room 4 of the district attorney's office had no windows, just 4 pale gray walls and a cold metal table. I sat in the corner, shrouded in shadow, while Detective Morrison and Chief Prosecutor Stone sat opposite the empty chair reserved for my mother. When the door opened, Madeline Vance walked in. She still held the arrogance of a queen forced to tour the slums. She placed her Hermes bag on the table, avoiding letting it touch the metal surface, then looked at Prosecutor Stone with tired, condescending eyes. I hope you are done intimidating my daughter, she said, voice icy. Our family lawyer will be here in 15 minutes to process bail. This is a disastrous misunderstanding, and I want to take Sarah home immediately. Prosecutor Stone, a middle-aged man with a rugged face, was unmoved. He clasped his hands, placing a thick file on the table. Mrs. Vance, I'm afraid you don't understand the situation, Stone said, voice deep and dangerous. We are not charging Sarah with simple assault. We are prosecuting her for aggravated assault, poisoning, and conspiracy to commit fraud. There will be no bail. My mother's face twitched, a small crack appearing on her perfect mask. Fraud? What the hell are you talking about? Stone pushed the file toward her. The printed pages of Sarah's search history, notes on the guardianship plan, and the timeline of accidents were laid out like death cards. Your daughter didn't lose control out of anger, Mrs. Vance. She systematically planned to strip her sister of her freedom. The goal was to render Elena incapacitated to steal the house Ms. Eleanor left behind. And my question for you is, are you an accomplice, or are you a mother so irresponsible you are blind? My mother picked up the papers. Her eyes scanned how to fake psychiatric records and adult guardianship process. Her hands began to shake. She knew these terms. She knew how much Sarah coveted that house. I didn't know, she whispered, voice wavering. It's just, Sarah has a strong personality. She always wants attention. She would never... Stop it, Mom. I stepped out of the shadows. My mother spun around, eyes wide in horror as if she had just seen a ghost. Elena? I walked closer to the table, looking straight at the woman who gave birth to me but never truly saw me. Stop lying, I said, voice calm but razor sharp. You know what Sarah is. You've known since the neighbor's cat disappeared when she was 10, right? You paid them not to call the police when the cat's body was found in our trash. My mother's face went white, the makeup unable to hide the naked fear. And when Sarah was 14, I continued, every word like a hammer driving nails into a coffin. The classmate who fell and broke her leg on the field trip. No one saw who pushed her, but you rushed to transfer Sarah schools the very next week. Why, Mom? Why, were you always running? The room fell into silence. Only my mother's heavy breathing remained. She looked down at her clenching hands, then at the evidence of Sarah's crimes on the table. The denial of 36 years finally collapsed under the weight of truth. She slumped into the chair, shoulders shaking. No longer the elegant Mrs. Madeline in front of me was just an old, scared, and guilty woman. I was afraid, she confessed, voice broken, so quiet I had to lean in to hear. I knew there was something wrong with Sarah since she was little. She didn't know how to love like other children. She looked at everything like toys to be destroyed. She looked up at me, tears smearing her thick mascara. I thought if I loved her more, if I gave her everything she wanted, I could fix her. I thought my love could fill the black hole in her soul. And the price was me, I said, emotionless. To keep your monster happy, you threw me in the cage for her to play with. You let her torture me. You let her push me downstairs. You let her crack my skull. Just because you were too cowardly to face the truth that you gave birth to a psychopath. My mother sobbed, covering her face with her hands. I'm sorry, Elena. I was wrong. I sacrificed you to protect the illusion of a happy family. Detective Morrison stood up, placing a witness statement form in front of my mother. Mrs. Vance, she said, professional but unable to hide her disdain. If you are truly remorseful, this is the time to atone. We need you to confirm under oath about Sarah's past violent behaviors that you covered up. Your testimony will prove this is a pattern of behavior, helping us ensure she receives the maximum sentence. My mother looked at the paper, then at me. In her eyes was a plea for forgiveness, but I only responded with a cold stare. She picked up the pen. Her trembling hand touched the paper. She was signing the verdict for her golden child, and also the verdict for her own conscience. I turned and walked to the door, leaving behind the sobbing of a woman who failed motherhood in the worst possible way. She chose to raise a monster, and now, that monster had returned to devour the entire family. It's done, I said to myself as I walked into the long hallway of the government building. Now it's time to end this play. Sunday, 6 p.m. The traditional family dinner at the Vance mansion took place just like a religious ritual where hypocrisy was worshipped instead of God. I sat at the end of the table, the familiar spot for the spare. My head was still bandaged in white, a silent reminder of the violence everyone was deliberately ignoring. The smell of beef bourguignon and expensive scented candles filled the large dining room, but to me, the air reeked of rot. Sarah sat in the center, to Mom's right. She was glowing. It was miraculous how quickly she recovered from the shock at the hospital. Tonight, she wore a bright red dress holding a wine glass, excitedly recounting how she fired an intern for daring to wear the wrong color tie. I told him, Sarah giggled, eyes sparkling with cruelty. This is an A-list office, not a circus. And so I had security throw him out immediately. You aunties should have seen his face, swollen like he was about to cry. The aunts and uncles laughed along politely. My mother, Madeline, sat at the head of the table, but she wasn't laughing. She stared at the porcelain plate, gripping her napkin so tight her knuckles were white. She knew what was coming. The doorbell rang. Not the timid ring of a delivery person. It was a long, insistent ring, demanding immediate attention. Dan started to get up, but my mother put a hand on his arm. keeping him seated. "Leave it," she said, voice hoarse. The dining room doors swung wide open. The cozy atmosphere was ripped apart by the presence of 4 uniformed police officers, led by Detective Morrison in a cold gray trench coat. Laughter died instantly. Knives and forks dropped onto porcelain plates, creating jarring sounds. "What is going on?" Sarah asked, voice still holding the superiority of the hostess, but the wine in her glass began to ripple. "This is a private residence. You can't just barge in." "Sarah Vance," Detective Morrison interrupted, her voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room. "You are under arrest." 2 officers stepped forward, movements quick and professional. Sarah jumped up, her chair crashing backward. "What? Arrest me? For what? For that silly birthday prank? Mom, tell them something." She turned to my mother, eyes wide with plea. This was Sarah's survival tactic for 38 years. Cause trouble and wait for Mom to clean it up. But this time, Madeline Vance didn't stand up. She didn't yell at the police. She didn't call a lawyer. She slowly lifted her head, looking at her darling daughter with red, swollen, and empty eyes. "I'm sorry, Sarah," she whispered. "I can't cover for you anymore." Sarah's world collapsed in that moment. I watched the transformation on her face, a scene worth more than any horror movie. Confusion turned to panic, and then from panic, it morphed into something darker, more primal, pure hatred. "You sold me out?" Sarah hissed, voice distorted, stripping away all elegance. "Ms. Sarah Vance." Morrison read the Miranda rights while the handcuffs clicked coldly, locking her hands behind her back. "You are charged with aggravated assault, poisoning with a controlled substance, and fraud. Anything you say from now on." "It's your fault." Sarah's scream tore through the space, making the aunts jump. She wasn't looking at the police. Or Mom. She was looking at me. Her eyes were bulging, teeth gritted as if she wanted to chew on my bones. "It's all your fault, you bitch!" Sarah screamed, struggling violently in the grip of 2 large officers. "You shouldn't have been born. That house is mine. Everything is mine. You are just a parasite clinging to this family." I remained seated, taking a sip of water, my cold gaze meeting the raging monster. "Take her away," Morrison ordered. As she was dragged to the door, Sarah didn't stop screaming. Confessions poured out like a flood, captured entirely by the police body cams, undeniable evidence for court later. "I should have pushed harder 3 years ago. I should have drowned you in that pool when you were 5. Because of you, Dad left. Because of you, my life is miserable." The door slammed shut. Police sirens wailed outside, flashing red through the dining room windows, then faded. Silence enveloped the room, so heavy you could hear the candles sputtering. No one dared to breathe loud. The relatives looked at me, then at my mother, with utter horror. They had just witnessed the perfect family mask ripped off, exposing the festering wounds inside. My mother still sat there, staring at the empty chair where Sarah just sat. Sarah's wine glass had tipped over, red wine spreading on the white tablecloth looking like a fresh blood stain. "Everyone leave," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried the authority of the true owner. "The party is over." One by one, the aunts and uncles stood up, grabbing coats and bags, leaving the house as if it were on fire. They dared not look me in the eye. They were bystanders, people who saw me bullied for years but chose silence to get a free dinner. Their cowardice made me sick. Only me, Mom, and Dan remained in the large dining room. Dan, the spineless stepfather, finally spoke up, voice trembling. "Elena," Sarah said. "Sarah said because of you, your dad left." "What was that about?" I stood up, walking toward my mother. She shrank in her chair, aging 10 years in just one evening. "That's a good question," I said, looking down at Mom. Aunt Patricia told me about the box. But there is one thing she didn't know. Something Grandma hid in the secret compartment of her old writing desk. A returned letter from 31 years ago. I pulled a yellowed envelope from my pocket, throwing it on the table, right on the spreading red wine stain. Grandma didn't just leave the house, Mom. She left the answer to the biggest mystery of my life. Why did Dad Michael leave when I was only 5? My mother looked at the envelope. She recognized it. Her breath hitched. No, she whispered, shaking her head frantically. Impossible. I burned it. You burned the copy Dad sent, I replied coldly. But Grandma kept the original returned by the post office, and tonight, we will read it together, to see who really is the monster that chased Dad away. The large dining room was now hollow, left with only the remnants of a disastrous party. Candles burned low, wax dripping like tears on silver candlesticks, and the red wine stain on the white tablecloth like an unhealed wound. My mother sat motionless, eyes glued to the yellowed envelope in the middle of the table. She dared not touch it. She looked at it as if it were a time bomb that had been ticking for 31 years. Read it, I ordered. Not a request. It was a command from the person in control. My mother shook her head weakly, lips moving soundlessly. She knew what was written inside. She had known for a long time, but she chose to bury it under 6 feet of lies and pride. I picked up the envelope, tearing the old wax seal. The sound of tearing paper rang out sharp in the deadly silence. I pulled out 3 handwritten pages. Ink faded to brown, but the strong, urgent strokes of Dad Michael still appeared clearly. If you don't read it, I will, I said, cold voice echoing through the room. I began to read aloud, word for word, ensuring my mother and Dan couldn't miss a single syllable. Madeline, I am writing this letter because you refuse to answer my calls. You tell everyone I left because I couldn't handle the pressure of raising 2 kids. You tell Elena, she is only 5, that her daddy doesn't love her anymore. You are poisoning that child's soul to cover for your own cowardice. I paused, glancing at Mom. She was covering her ears, but I knew she still heard. Dad's voice across 3 decades still carried the weight of 1,000 pounds. I didn't leave Elena. I had to leave because I couldn't live under the same roof as the monster you are raising, and your blind denial is making everything dangerous. Do you remember the night of June 14th, 1992? The night I came home early from my business trip? Dan, the stepfather sitting next to her, snapped his head up. He had never heard of this. I continued reading, my voice starting to shake with suppressed rage, but I forced myself to stay calm. I went up to the nursery to check on the kids. The nightlight was on, and I saw Sarah. She was 2.5, Madeline. Only 2.5. She wasn't sleeping. She was standing in Elena's crib. She was holding the small down pillow, the one you embroidered Elena's name on. The air in the room seemed to solidify. A chill ran down my spine visualizing that scene. Sarah wasn't playing. She was using both hands, putting her entire tiny body weight to press the pillow down on her sister's face. Elena's legs were kicking wildly. She was suffocating. Her face had started turning purple. A choked sob escaped my mother's throat. She buried her head on the table, arms clutching her head. I rushed in, threw Sarah off, and picked Elena up. You ran in right after. You saw Elena crying, passing out from fear. You saw the pillow. But what did you do? You hugged Sarah. You said, she was just playing. She wanted to cover her sister with a blanket. You screamed at me, calling me crazy when I said our daughter just tried to kill her sister. I put the first page down, picking up the second. That wasn't the only time, Madeline. The neighbor's cat. The accidental boiling water burn when I was away. I begged you to take Sarah to a child psychiatrist. I said she showed signs of serious conduct disorder, but you refused. You were afraid of outsiders judging. You were afraid your perfect family would have a stain. I looked straight at my mother, voice steely. And here's the last line. Listen closely, Mom. I left because you gave an ultimatum. Either silently accept Sarah as a normal child, or leave this house. I was wrong to leave Elena behind. I am a coward. But Madeline, you are the guilty one. You chose to protect the monster and sacrifice the innocent child. One day, Sarah will do something you can't cover up anymore, and when that time comes, the blood will be on your hands. I dropped the letter on the table. It slid lightly on the polished wood, stopping right in front of Dan. He picked it up, reading through it, face turning from shock to disgust. He stood up abruptly, pushing his chair away from my mother as if she were a source of infection. You knew, Dan whispered, voice trembling. For 15 years living with me, you knew that girl was capable of murder, but you still let her live in the house with us? You still let her torture Elena? My mother lifted her head. Her face was ruined, makeup sliding off to reveal wrinkles of misery and deceit. I thought she would change, she wheezed, voice shattering like glass. I thought if I loved her enough, if I compensated her, the evil in her would disappear. I am her mother. How can I accept the child I birthed is a demon? So you turned me into a scapegoat, I said, cutting her off. I walked closer, leaning both hands on the table, looking deep into her panicked eyes. To maintain your illusion, you needed a trash can to hold all of Sarah's badness. Every time Sarah did wrong, you blamed me. Sarah pushed me? It's because I'm clumsy. Sarah lost things? It's because I wasn't careful. Dad left because of Sarah? No, you told me every day that Dad left because I was a burden. I laughed, a sour smile with no joy. You brainwashed me for 36 years. You made me believe I was useless, deserving of hate, when in reality, I was the only survivor of your failed love experiment. My mother reached out, trying to grab my hand. Elena, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I will make it up. I stepped back, avoiding her touch like fire. Too late, I said. Your apology doesn't erase the crack in my skull. It doesn't erase the 31 years I lived in guilt thinking I chased Dad away. I turned to Dan, who was standing frozen in the corner. And you, Dan. You were always silent. You saw everything, but you chose fake peace over justice. Your silence was just as toxic as her actions. I took the envelope and letters, the final proof to exonerate my dad and convict my mother's enabling. Tomorrow, my lawyer will contact you regarding civil damages, and I advise you to find a good psychiatrist, not for Sarah, she is beyond saving, but for yourself. So you can learn to live with the truth that you created a monster and destroyed the other child. I turned and walked away, heels clicking, steadily on the wooden floor. The night air rushed in when I opened the front door, freezing but fresh. I took a deep breath. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel a weight on my shoulders. I was not the abandoned child. I was the survivor. Behind me, in the magnificent dining room, my mother's weeping finally broke out, the cry of a person who just realized she lost everything for a lie. 2 months after that fateful night, the case of State versus Sarah Vance officially closed. There were no lengthy trials like in the movies, because the evidence was overwhelming. When Sarah's expensive defense lawyer saw the body cam footage, where his client screamed confessions and victim blamed, he did the only thing possible, a plea deal to avoid a long prison sentence. But for a narcissist like Sarah, the court sentence wasn't as painful as the sentence of public opinion. I sat in the back row of the courtroom, watching my sister. Sarah was no longer wearing red dresses, no longer sparkling with jewelry. She wore the drab orange-gray jumpsuit of the county jail. Her usually golden hair was matted and stringy. Without makeup to cover up, her face looked gaunt and 10 years older. She kept her head down, daring not look at the judge, and certainly daring not look back at me. Judge Harrison, an Iron Lady famous for being strict, banged the gavel. Defendant Sarah Vance, the judge's voice rang out cold and decisive. Based on evidence of aggravated assault and poisoning, along with psychological records showing a complete lack of compassion, the court sentences 4 years probation, accompanied by 12 months of house arrest with electronic monitoring. Sarah exhaled, shoulders sagging in relief. She thought she got away, but the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, Judge Harrison continued, eyes sharp piercing Sarah. The defendant is required to attend 90 days of inpatient psychiatric treatment at the state mental hospital, followed by mandatory therapy twice a week for the duration of probation. The defendant must also fully reimburse medical costs for victim Elena Vance, plus punitive damages of $50,000. And finally, the death blow. The court issues a permanent restraining order. The defendant is not allowed near Ms. Elena Vance, her residence or workplace within 1,000 feet. Any violation will result in immediate imprisonment without trial. As police escorted her out of the courtroom to the mental hospital, Sarah turned to look at me one last time. No more explosive hatred like that night. In her eyes was just desperate emptiness. She realized she hadn't just lost her freedom, she had lost control over her scapegoat forever. But the real punishment happened outside the courthouse doors. When news of the case spread, partly thanks to public records, the perfect world Sarah worked so hard to build collapsed like dominoes. The real estate firm where Sarah was a director immediately fired her. They sent a cold email, terminating her contract for gross violation of ethical codes, along with a demand to return the company car and corporate credit card. The successful businesswoman reputation she built on social media evaporated overnight. Sarah's friends, the ones who used to join her in mocking me, quickly turned their backs. They didn't want to be associated with someone who poisoned her own sister. People who used to comment praises on Sarah's Instagram now silently unfollowed, deleted photos with her, pretending they never knew her. Sarah became a leper in the very elite social circle she craved. The most ironic part lay in where Sarah would live after finishing 90 days of psychiatric treatment. My parents' house. Having lost her job, income, and under house arrest, Sarah was forced to move back to sponge off Mom and Dan. But that house was no longer an enabling paradise. It had become a psychological prison. I heard from Aunt Patricia that the air in that house was now thick with fear. My mother, after reading Dad's letter, now looked at Sarah not with blind love, but with terror. She locked her bedroom door at night. She hid all the knives in the kitchen. She jumped every time Sarah walked into a room. Dan completely avoided Sarah, spending most time at the golf club or office, only coming home late to sleep. Sarah, once the center of the family universe, was now completely isolated in the very house she used to rule. She had to wear an ankle monitor, couldn't go anywhere, had no one to manipulate, no one to vent anger on. For someone craving attention and power like Sarah, being turned invisible and feared by her own parents was a punishment more cruel than death. And me? I didn't care about them anymore. 2 weeks after the trial, I stood in front of Grandma's Victorian house. A locksmith was changing all the door locks. I had hired an industrial cleaning company to scrub away every trace of the past. The heavy curtains my mother used to hang to block light had been removed. I threw open all the windows, letting sun and wind rush into every corner. I stood in the empty living room, once filled with painful memories and resigned silence. In my hand was an interior renovation blueprint. I wouldn't just live here. I would turn this place into something much more meaningful than an inheritance. Lawyer Henderson called to announce Sarah had transferred the first compensation payment. That money, plus my savings, was more than enough to start a new chapter. I looked into the large mirror in the hallway. The mirror I used to avoid because I was afraid to see a weak Elena. Today, reflected in it, was a woman with neatly cut short hair, bright eyes, and shoulders no longer hunched in fear. "It's over, Grandma," I whispered to the quiet space. "I took back what belongs to us." But the best revenge isn't seeing the enemy suffer. The best revenge is living a brilliant life they can never touch. And I had a plan for this house. A plan that would make Grandma Eleanor's legacy live forever and make the name Sarah Vance fade into oblivion. 14 months after that bloody birthday night, I stood on the porch of the Victorian house, filling my lungs with the crisp New England autumn air. The musty smell of family secrets was gone, replaced by the smell of fresh paint, polished pine, and freedom. A shiny brass plaque was mounted neatly beside the main door. Patricia's Home, Women and Children Support Center. It was the project I poured all my heart and money into. I didn't want to live in this house just to enjoy it alone. I wanted to turn Grandma Eleanor's legacy into a fortress. This place used to be a prison for forgotten children like me. Now it would be a shelter for women escaping toxic families, those needing a safe place to heal invisible wounds. Aunt Patricia walked out from the kitchen, holding a tray of hot gingerbread cookies, Grandma's secret recipe. Auntie was no longer the shy shadow in the corner. At 55, she was glowing more than ever. She was the manager of the center, the mother to dozens of young girls finding their voices. Watching her laugh with volunteers, I realized the biggest revenge against bullies isn't harming them, but proving they cannot extinguish our light. A black sedan pulled up to the gate. I squinted. The car door opened. My mother, Madeline, stepped out. She looked much older. Gone was the haughty, noble look. She wore simple clothes, holding a small cardboard box. She stood hesitantly at the gate, looking into the house, where laughter now echoed, an atmosphere she never managed to create for her family. I signaled Aunt Patricia to continue working, then walked out to the gate alone. I didn't unlock it. I stood inside, she stood outside. The iron bars were the physical and psychological boundary I had permanently established. "Elena," she said, voice hoarse and weak. "I heard today is the official opening." "That's right," I replied briefly. She looked down at the box in her hands. "I found these in storage. Your childhood photo albums. Your 5th-grade diary. I thought you would want to keep them." She passed the box through the gap in the fence. I took it. "How is Sarah?" I asked, not out of care but as a security check. My mother shuddered slightly. "She is still in outpatient treatment. She hates me, Elena. She blames me for everything. Every day living in the house with her is like walking on a minefield. I had to install cameras in my bedroom because I'm afraid she'll sneak in at night." That was justice. My mother chose to protect the monster, and now she had to live in the cage with it. "Are you still going to therapy?" I asked. "Twice a week." She nodded, eyes teary. "The doctor says I have codependency. I am learning to forgive myself, but the doctor says your forgiveness is not something I have the right to demand." "The doctor is right," I said, voice calm. "I don't hate you anymore, Madeline. Hatred takes too much energy, but I also cannot invite you into my life. My safety is more important than your guilt." My mother nodded, accepting the verdict. She looked over my shoulder at the brilliantly lit house behind. "Grandma would be very proud," she whispered. "You are much stronger than me. You are like her." "I know," I smiled. "Goodbye, Mom." I turned and walked away, not looking back. The sound of the car engine faded behind me. I hugged the memory box, stepping up the stairs where Aunt Patricia was waiting with a warm smile. We didn't need a perfect family. We built a family of our own. Scene change. Elena sits in her office looking straight into the camera, breaking the fourth wall to talk to the audience. Thank you for staying with Elena Vance's story until the very last second. This isn't just a story about revenge, about schemes to steal assets or evil sisters. This is a painful but necessary reminder. Sometimes, the people who share your blood are the ones who most want to see you fail. If you are watching this video and see your reflection in Elena, if you are the abandoned child, the invisible person at family parties, or the one always blamed for others' mistakes, then I want to tell you this. You are not crazy. Your pain is real, and you have no obligation to set yourself on fire to keep those who never appreciated you warm. Society often teaches us that family comes first, that we must forgive unconditionally because blood is thicker than water. That is a dangerous lie. Real family are the people who love, respect, and protect you. If they hurt you, they are not family, they are just relatives who share DNA. Setting boundaries is not selfish. Walking away is not betrayal. It is an act of survival. Don't wait until your head is smashed like Elena to realize your self-worth. Open your own box, seek the truth, and have the courage to step out of the shadows. The best revenge isn't making enemies suffer. The best revenge is healing, success, and brilliant happiness without their permission. Live the life they said you could never have. If this story touched your heart, or reminded you of someone who needs courage to escape toxic control, please share this video. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell. At this channel, we don't just tell stories, we bring justice to the underdogs. And leave a comment below. Have you ever had to cut contact with a family member to protect yourself? Your story could be the torch lighting the way for others. I read every single one of your comments, because here, your voice is always heard. See you in the next story.